Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Be Your Own Hero podcast. As always, I'm your host, author, and entrepreneur, Brittany Renew. I love having other entrepreneurs on, especially those in the creative field, to just kind of dive into these things that we're all going through. We're all going through a lot of similar things, and we can learn from each other. So today, I am joined by another fellow author and entrepreneur, Jasmin De Anda. Did I say that right?
De Anda. It's close.
Okay, we'll go with
Close.
that. She owns an online boutique called Stargazer Lily Boutique, but she's also an author. So she has a newly published fantasy novel called Archaic, and it's book one in her series, Luxwick series. So welcome, Jasmin. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Jasmin. So I'd love to start off by you just sharing a little bit more about yourself, kind of how you got started with the online boutique and, going into releasing your book.
Well, I started my own Etsy not long after high school, just painting letters. And because of that, I had already started kind of selling on my own. But during the lockdown, my mom was getting really frustrated with her job, and she had mentioned how she really wants to make candles. So I told her we should take advantage of the free time, and I started looking into all the legal requirements, registering an LLC, getting all the required licenses, paying the right fees, and we started the website on Shopify and launched in January of the next year, 2021.
Okay.
And I had already been writing since high school, but I hadn't actually finished anything. But with the business, I thought it was time to just finally finish that first draft of something I'd started like 6 years before. And yeah, I finally finished my book. I had to go through all the stuff of finding an editor and creating the cover, but yeah, because of the business, it just felt like the right time to try to actually make that happen.
Yeah. Well, just speaking from someone who, also is running another business, it's just carving out that time to do that. I know the feelings of what you're saying. Do you feel like has there been any epiphanies that you've had over the past couple years of something that's really helped you be able to balance having the two things more? Anything like tips or tricks that you would love to share with other fellow creatives?
Well, I technically still have another job because
Mm-hmm.
the business, of course, isn't profitable from the beginning. Um, but but the good thing is that I've always worked from home. Uh, since about 2018, I've been working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I've gotten used to kind of organizing my time so that I'm not just, wasting time watching
Yeah.
TV, hanging around. So, making sure I start my day early, and then I'll go through my checklist, get my actual computer work done, and then try to use every available amount of free time to work on just something, whether it's products for my store or writing or editing. But um, where it's not really like I set deadlines for these things, I'm just making sure to use up whatever time I have.
Yeah. Well, that's an important point because I think it's easy for us to just fall into that habit of let me go watch a Netflix show or, go clean my house or whatever. And, there's a time and place for all that stuff. But to your point of just making sure that if you've got a spare 15 minutes between another meeting or something, sounds like you're like, okay, let me utilize this in the best way. And I'll edit this chapter or I'll sit down to write. So that's awesome. And I think it just, you recognize that and it just takes the discipline for someone to recognize that and implement that in their life. So that's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just for context, what types of products do you have for your online store?
My mom's part is candles and concrete items, and then my part is hand painted items. Sometimes it's purses, sometimes it's wood letters for nurseries, or customized items like jewelry cases, journals, usually whatever I can make with vinyl or sublimation.
Hmm. Very cool. Do you feel like that you've been able to use the skills that you've developed with that and kind of impart that into your the book side of things with releasing a book and kind of getting, I mean, it's a business in and of itself, so kind of getting that book business off the ground.
It definitely helped that because I've been creating digitally for the store, that I was able to make the book cover myself, and that I had experience with Microsoft figuring
Mhm.
out the formatting and getting the right files for the uploads on the self-publishing platforms.
Yeah.
So I would say it helped a lot in that as far as knowing how to do everything for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I learned too, is like there's so many steps to getting your book out there, like all the different platforms, making sure it's formatted right. And so you either got to learn to do that yourself, which it sounds like you were able to do, or hire someone to help, which I did that in my case. But, it's like just do something to get it, to make it work because the goal is to get the book out there. So, yeah, and congrats for you being able to, I would say, like, for you to balance everything because, like, you're saying you got kind of your standard 9 to 5 job plus an online store with your mom, but having the book. So, I would say kudos to you for being disciplined and set aside time and to, learn the stuff you had to learn and put that out there. So that's awesome. Is there something that you would say that you've learned during this process that you wish someone would have told you at the beginning to kind of maybe save you some time or some heartache, something like that that you've learned that you could share because there's other people that are listening and watching that are kind of in that beginning stages.
I wished people had told or I'd seen how competitive it really is if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to pursue traditional publishing.
Mm-hmm.
Because people share all the stories of like J.K. Rowling got rejected by 11 publishers, and um, Stephanie Meyer got like 14 rejections.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I realized after I tried to pursue an agent how that amount really wasn't that much.
Yeah.
And they were actually very lucky,
Hmm.
because even though I learned that it does, of course, finding an agent does have a lot to do with how good your manuscript is and talent, that it also has to do with the current trends and if the agent's wish list, what they're specifically looking for.
Yeah.
So I went in with a fantasy novel and a contemporary fantasy and realized quickly that that wasn't really in the market at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They were mostly looking for romance, young adult, LGBT stories, and my book didn't fall into those categories. So I realized the likelihood of the timing was wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of agents probably just read the genre and just said,
Yeah.
nope, not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of the publishing world because they're having to look at trends and predict trends and pick books off of that because it's a mass market at that point. But, art doesn't fit into every category. There's not like there's so much out there. And so like that doesn't mean that your story's not worth sharing. So for you to say, okay, well, I'm going to take control because I still want to put my art out there because I know that there's people out there that want to hear it. So then it sounds like you pivoted to pursue publishing it on your own at that point.
Mhm. Yeah, I think if I had understood how it really worked for publishing, I would have probably focused on one of my projects that are more in that trend at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, for sure. So give us a little bit of a synopsis about what your book is about.
Okay, well, my book is a contemporary fantasy. It follows Eric Blackwood, who is a 13-year-old boy who was stolen from his mother was killed and he was stolen from his family when he was a baby. And then the story takes place really 13 years later when he's found by that family and learns that his powers, because he's a sorcerer, that his powers are actually part of an entire species,
Mm,
and is taken to a safe haven. But he immediately finds himself in trouble um, with this conflict between this immortal sorcerer Neil and another immortal sorcerer who he shares a mental link with.
very interesting. Okay. And this is a planned series, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. It's first book of a series. Hopefully, I can put some more time to writing and get that second book out.
Yes, I'm there with you with that. So well, I love the premise and with my book has a similar premise where like someone who has magic being a different species, so I like that idea because it kind of that naturally brings in a lot of conflict because you've got a non-human in a human world kind of interacting, so that be interesting to see like the conflicts that play out in your world and the world that you've built. That's really cool. So, something I love to ask is how do you think that you have become a hero in your own story? Because, with books, we have kind of a classic hero's journey that's going on, which sounds like what you're explaining with your book. And it's such a great theme. And, that's something that I have with the title of this podcast being Be Your Own Hero. So, I love to kind of see how that is mirrored in our own world because we see them in fiction. So I would love to hear your take on that. Like, how do you think that you've kind of been on a journey of self-discovery and become a hero in your own world?
Well, I've been very lucky that I have parents who always made it clear that they would continue to support us so long as we actually pretty much to give me that time to pursue something I actually like that can support me. So because of that, I've had a lot of time to figure out what that is, to learn, um, and thank God start the business.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of saying you had really good support system around you that could help you give you the space to grow as a person, which is amazing. I mean, not everyone has that, so definitely, yeah, that's really amazing. Do you think that you have maybe weaved some of those themes into your book with your main character? Because it sounds like there might be like a coming of age kind of theme going on there.
I wanted to put when I decided that I was going to have a teenage character, but also an immortal who's almost 200 years old. I kind of wanted to put in how, like, with the teenager, he's young, but that kind of feeling like you need to help,
Mm-hmm.
like you need to do something, that even though he's 13 and he should just be a kid and not worry about that stuff, he's seeing problems and trying to find ways that he can help.
Mm-hmm.
And with the immortal character, I wanted to put that because most of the adults in my life, they work really hard, um, really too hard, and for because of that, for him, I wrote in how he's feels this responsibility, like everything falls on his shoulders, and because of that, he, even though you'd expect him to be this very put together, mature character, he has problems sharing the load.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to put in, what I've seen with a lot of other adults, that they burn themselves out and don't actually ask for help.
We often struggle to ask for help. And I mean, I can definitely see that in my own life. But just kind of being asking for help. And then it's interesting to hear you talk about a character that's really young, but still feels that responsibility for the world around him and like wanting to make a difference, and kind of like there's a level of maturity there, and I think we often feel like we're kind of meant for more, but we hold ourselves back. So that's interesting to hear you kind of put that theme into that with your main character. And of course, as we read, we'll see that character go on that journey and become the best version of themselves, which is super cool. I would love for you to share with the audience. You had mentioned to me a book sample that you created, and it's been helping you a lot with kind of getting the word out with your book. So I'd love for you to share that, and maybe it'll help some other authors out there.
I will, mention that advertising is a struggle.
Yeah, definitely.
I've, actually paying for marketing is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt like Instagram and Facebook and all of that is really a skill that I don't have. So I was trying to figure out how to get my book out there, and I saw Barnes and Noble has personal prints, and they had a little 4x6 size book. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I would put in just a small portion of my book. So I
Yeah,
created the
that's cool.
cover, manuscript, got the book description, the first 2 chapters, and then on the back it has information on where to purchase the book, my links, and they cost about a little under $3 each to print with shipping.
Okay. Okay.
And so I've been passing these out just when someone takes an interest in, because I have my books when I go to markets.
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone wants to buy a book that they don't know anything about, they've never heard of.
Yeah.
So it's been good when people kind of see the book and take a little bit of an interest to give them these so that they have a little sneak peek. And that's hopefully led to some of the online sales. But yeah, it's been good to get people interested so far. I'll
Yeah.
see them soon.
But I mean, I do love the idea. And if you think about, yeah, like Barnes and Nobles or Amazon or whatever online, they typically have like, here, read a sample, and it might be a chapter. So like digitally, some of those other websites have that. So what a great idea for you to make
Yeah.
that a print version, because you're going to markets already, and just, sharing that out with people and trying to you're basically just like an easy way to get people interested. So it's like the path of least resistance. Like here's a free sample, and it's like a no pressure thing, because I know we all hate to like feels like a sales and like feel like a slimy salesperson or whatever. So I feel like that's an easy way
Yeah.
to be like, here you go, here's a free sample, and they'll enjoy it and be able to buy the book. So I love that. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
it's definitely a lot easier.
yeah, well, I was gonna say, and it sounds inexpensive too, because that's another factor, like you mentioned earlier, just with advertising, and there's costs for advertising online that can get really expensive, especially if you feel like you don't know what you're doing with that stuff. And so this is like an inexpensive way to do advertising in a really like subtle way, because you're already out there talking to people. So I like that a lot.
Well, plus I figured as far as costs, digital marketing eventually expires. You
Yeah.
pay for a certain timeline, So it doesn't last. But these, if someone finishes with theirs and decides to just give the sample to a friend or,
Mhm.
um, something that can keep going.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, word of mouth. I mean, that's, word spread from that. It's a great benefit of it too. I love that. Well, I love hearing more about you and kind of your journey to publishing and just like we talked about earlier, just kind of maintaining, balancing, running a business, having a life, having a social life, being a good, friend, a good family member, and still pursuing your passion. So it sounds like you're making a lot of progress in that. And I love the tip of the sample. I mean, I think that's a really practical thing that authors and really anyone, I mean, not even just authors, but you think about anyone that has a product based business, creating a sample of that main thing that you're selling. I mean, that's such an easy way to get people's attention for a low cost. So I love that. To wrap things up, I would love to hear if there's any other ideas that you're working on, projects, or is it mainly focused on book 2, anything like that that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I always have multiple projects because when I hit that like writer's block, I
Mhm.
think it's easier to just switch to a complete different book and work on that instead of stressing over not knowing what to write next.
Yeah.
So I'm working on book 2, but I'm also jumping back and forth between that and a young adult fantasy.
Mhm.
That's a witches and warlocks, boarding schools, a mystery. Main girl has her brother ran away 3 years prior, and now she's trying to find him.
Mm. Interesting.
So I've been going back and forth between that and the sequel, just whenever I feel like the ideas are flowing for one.
Mhm.
Usually, I find when I get stuck on that one and I go back to the first book, suddenly it's a lot easier to come up with new material.
Yeah. Yeah, you're getting the creative juices flowing again, and so you're able to then kind of transfer that into the other book because you got unstuck. I mean, essentially what you're saying. You got unstuck with the writer's block
Yeah.
by doing something creative, even though it was unrelated, not specifically related to one project. So that's a good tip. I'll have to try that. Awesome. Well, yeah, I love just kind of learning more about you and like the world that you built with your book. It sounds really interesting. And I hope that everyone can kind of take some practical stuff away from what you've shared because, we're all out here doing a bunch of things and living life. So practical things that we can take away with that to help us kind of stay motivated, stay organized, like keep making progress on our dreams is what I'm all about. So thank you for sharing all that stuff. So yeah, to close, let everyone know what's the best way to connect with you online, your website, Instagram, where they can buy your book, all that good stuff.
I'd say I interact more on Threads. I realize how good of a platform that is now for books, um, for authors communicating. So I'm on there more than anything, along with Instagram. But I do have my YouTube and my website. I have all the links on my Instagram, but I have my YouTube um, to try to kind of establish more of a platform for me.
Hmm.
But I keep all my information on my website that's under my name about the book, about where to buy it, and the upcoming stuff.
Well, Jasmine, thank you so much again for taking the time to be here and sharing all your insights. I know people can definitely get some good little tips in there, and I hope that everyone will check out your book because it sounds really interesting. I mean, I'm a big fan of anything like magic or fantasy related, so congrats on that. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.